The morning sun was just breaking through the clouds when Flight 247 started boarding at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. It was supposed to be a routine Tuesday morning flight to Miami, the kind that happens hundreds of times every week. Business travelers were typing away on their laptops, families were juggling carry-on bags, and the gate area buzzed with the usual pre-flight energy. Rebecca had been a flight attendant for almost 8 years now. She'd seen it all, or at least she thought she had. As passengers began filing onto the plane, she stood near the business class section with her practiced smile, greeting each person with a warm good morning and occasionally helping someone stow their luggage in the overhead bins. Everything was going smoothly until she noticed something unusual. 2 kids had made their way into business class and were settling into seats 2A and 2B, right by the window. The girl looked to be about 12, maybe 13, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her younger brother appeared to be around 10, clutching a faded blue backpack like it was the most precious thing in the world. What caught Rebecca's attention wasn't just their age. Though unaccompanied minors in business class were rare, it was everything else. The girl wore a simple gray hoodie that had seen better days, with a small tear near the sleeve that had been carefully stitched up. The boys' sneakers were clean but worn, the kind you keep wearing long after they should have been replaced because there's no money for new ones. Their small backpacks looked like they'd been used for years, covered in patches and fraying at the edges. Rebecca had worked enough flights to know what business class usually looked like. Expensive suits, designer handbags, leather briefcases, smartwatches that cost more than most people's monthly rent. These children didn't fit that picture, and in her experience, that usually meant someone had made a mistake or was trying to get away with something. She walked over with her professional smile still in place, though a small knot of concern was forming in her stomach. The job required her to check these things, even if it felt uncomfortable. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, standing in the aisle beside their seats. "May I see your boarding passes, please?" The girl looked up and Rebecca noticed the tiredness in her eyes, the kind that seemed too heavy for someone so young. The girl reached into her pocket and pulled out 2 crumpled boarding passes, handing them over without saying a word. Rebecca unfolded the papers and felt her suspicion confirmed. The passes clearly showed economy seats, row 38, all the way in the back of the plane. She'd dealt with situations like this before, usually with passengers trying to sneak into better seats hoping no one would notice. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, keeping her tone gentle, "but these passes are for economy class. You'll need to move to your assigned seats in row 38. The girl, whose name tag on her backpack read Maya, shook her head slowly. "We're supposed to sit here," she said quietly but firmly. "Someone told us to sit in these exact seats." Rebecca felt that familiar tension that comes with passenger disputes. The plane was still boarding and she had a schedule to keep. "I understand, but these are business class seats. They're quite expensive and they belong to other passengers. Can you tell me who told you to sit here?" The younger boy, his eyes starting to glisten with tears, whispered something to his sister. Maya put her arm around him protectively before looking back up at Rebecca. "A nice man told us before he went toward the front of the plane. He said we should sit in 2A and 2B and that everything was taken care of." Rebecca glanced around, looking for any adult who might be traveling with these children, but saw no one paying them any attention. The other business class passengers were getting settled, stowing bags, adjusting their seats, completely absorbed in their own pre-flight routines. "Sweetheart, I need you to move to your real seats now," Rebecca said, trying to maintain patience. "We have people waiting to board, and we can't have you sitting in seats that aren't assigned to you." By now, some of the other passengers were starting to notice the situation. A man in seat 3C, wearing an expensive suit and a Rolex that caught the cabin lights, looked up from his phone with an annoyed expression. A woman across the aisle craned her neck to see what was causing the holdup. Maya's jaw tightened and she gripped her brother's hand. "We were told to sit here. We're not trying to cause trouble. Please. We just want to do what we were told." The younger boy started crying softly, trying to hide his face in his sister's shoulder. Rebecca felt a pang of sympathy, she really did, but she also had rules to follow. Airlines were strict about seating assignments, especially in business class where passengers paid hundreds or thousands of dollars extra for those seats. "I understand you're upset," Rebecca said, "but I can't let you stay here without proper documentation. If someone really upgraded your seats, it would show in the system." She pulled out her tablet and scanned the boarding passes again, checking the seat assignments. Everything confirmed what she already knew. These kids were supposed to be in economy, and there was no record of any upgrade. The man in 3C spoke up then, his voice dripping with impatience. "Are we going to have a problem here? Some of us have connections to make in Miami. This is business class, not a daycare." Rebecca shot him a look that said, "Not helping," but turned her attention back to the children. The situation was escalating, and other passengers were starting to pull out their phones. Some were checking the time. Others were watching the scene unfold with curiosity or judgment. Maya pulled something from her pocket, a small piece of notebook paper folded several times. She unfolded it carefully and showed it to Rebecca. On it, written in neat handwriting, were the numbers 2A and 2B and nothing else. No signature, no explanation, no official airline letterhead. "This is what he gave us," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly but still determined. "He wrote down the seat numbers and told us to sit here." Rebecca looked at the paper and felt her frustration growing. This could be anything. The kids could have written it themselves, or maybe someone played a cruel joke on them. Either way, she had a plane to prepare for takeoff and couldn't let 2 children occupy premium seats without proper authorization. "I'm going to need to call my supervisor," Rebecca said, reaching for her radio. "Please wait here for just a moment." She stepped back into the galley and radioed for Jennifer, the head flight attendant. While she waited, she watched the 2 kids sitting there, the girl still holding her brother close, both of them looking scared and confused. Other passengers were getting restless now, checking their watches, sighing loudly, making it clear they were not happy about the delay. Within 2 minutes, Jennifer appeared, walking down the aisle with the kind of no-nonsense expression that came from 20 years in the airline industry. She was professional, efficient, and not known for tolerating any disruptions to her flights. Rebecca quickly explained the situation, keeping her voice low. Jennifer's expression remained stern as she listened, nodding occasionally. Her mind clearly already made up about what needed to happen. Jennifer approached the children with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello there. I'm Jennifer, the head flight attendant. I understand we have a little seating mix-up here." Before Maya could respond, Jennifer continued, "I need you both to gather your things and move to your actual seats right now. If you don't, I'll have no choice but to call security and have you removed from the flight entirely." The younger boy's crying got louder. Maya's face went pale and her hands started shaking. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "We need to get to Miami. Our mom, she's in the hospital and—" "That's very unfortunate," Jennifer interrupted, though her tone suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book. "But that doesn't change airline policy. You need to move now, or you won't be flying with us today at all." The entire business class section had gone quiet now, all eyes on the 2 children and the flight attendant standing over them. Someone in the back raised their phone, clearly recording. The man in 3C muttered something about people these days loud enough for everyone to hear. Rebecca felt uncomfortable with how harsh this was becoming. But Jennifer was her superior, and she knew better than to question her in front of passengers. The 2 women exchanged a glance, and Jennifer pulled out her own radio, her finger hovering over the button to call airport security. That's when everything changed. Just as Jennifer's finger was about to press the button on her radio to call security, a calm voice cut through the tension in the cabin. "Excuse me, is there some kind of problem here?" Everyone turned to look. A man was walking down the aisle from first class, moving with the kind of quiet confidence that made people naturally step aside. He looked to be in his mid-50s with graying hair and a friendly face. What struck Rebecca immediately was how casually he was dressed. While most first-class passengers wore business attire, this man had on a simple navy blue polo shirt and well-worn jeans. He could have been anyone's dad or uncle heading on vacation. Jennifer straightened up, clearly not expecting to be interrupted by a passenger. "Sir, this is crew business. We're handling a seating issue, and we'll have the situation resolved shortly so we can depart on time." The man smiled politely but didn't move away. Instead, he looked down at Maya and her brother, his expression softening with genuine concern. "Are you 2 all right?" he asked them directly, ignoring Jennifer completely. Maya nodded, though tears were now streaming down her face. Her little brother had buried his face completely in her hoodie, his small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Sir, I really must insist that you return to your seat," Jennifer said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "We need to prepare for departure, and these children need to move to their assigned seats in economy class." The man finally turned his attention back to Jennifer, and something in his demeanor shifted. He was still polite, still calm, but there was an authority in his voice that hadn't been there before. "And what exactly is the problem with where they're sitting now?" Rebecca jumped in, trying to explain. "These children have economy tickets but are sitting in business class seats. They claim someone told them to sit here, but we have no record of an upgrade in our system. We've asked them multiple times to move to their assigned seats." "Have you checked with the gate agent?" the man asked. "Sir, with all due respect, that's not standard protocol," Jennifer replied, clearly growing frustrated. "Upgrades show up in our system automatically. If there's no record, then no upgrade was processed. It's really quite simple." The man nodded slowly, as if considering this. "I see. And have you considered that maybe, just maybe, there might be an explanation you haven't thought of?" Jennifer's face flushed slightly. After 2 decades of flying, she didn't appreciate a passenger questioning her judgment. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but this really isn't your concern. Now please, we need to finalize boarding." "These children are sitting in seats 2A and 2B, correct?" the man asked, seemingly ignoring Jennifer's dismissal. "Yes, but those seats are exactly where they're supposed to be," the man finished, "because I personally upgraded them." There was a moment of complete silence in the cabin. Rebecca and Jennifer both stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. Jennifer recovered first, letting out a short, incredulous laugh. "Sir, passengers cannot upgrade other passengers. That's not how airline ticketing works. If you want to help these children, you'd need to go through proper channels at the ticket counter, purchase the upgrade, and have it processed through our system." The man reached into his pocket, and for a moment, Rebecca wondered if he was going to pull out some kind of receipt or confirmation. Instead, he took out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then held it out toward Jennifer. "Perhaps this will clarify things," he said simply. Jennifer took the phone, her expression still skeptical. Rebecca watched as her supervisor's eyes scanned whatever was on the screen. The change in Jennifer's face was instantaneous and dramatic. Her eyes went wide, her mouth fell open slightly, and all the color drained from her cheeks. She looked like someone had just told her the plane was missing an engine. "Oh my God," Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible. Her hand started trembling slightly as she held the phone. Rebecca leaned in closer, curiosity and confusion mixing together. "What is it?" Jennifer turned the phone so Rebecca could see. On the screen was an official airline employee ID badge with a photo, a name, and a title. Rebecca's heart dropped into her stomach as she read the words: Richard Chen, Chief Executive Officer, Skyward Airlines. The phone nearly slipped from Rebecca's hands as the realization hit her. This wasn't just any passenger. This was the passenger, the CEO, the person who ran the entire airline, the man who could fire both of them with a single word. And they just spent the last 10 minutes arguing with him about airline policy. Richard Chen took his phone back calmly, sliding it into his pocket. "Now, as I was saying, these children are sitting exactly where I told them to sit. Is that going to be a problem?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Jennifer looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Around them, the other business class passengers had gone completely silent. The man in 3C who'd been so vocal about the delay was suddenly very interested in something outside his window. The woman across the aisle had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. Several people who'd been recording quickly lowered their phones, probably wondering if they'd just filmed themselves looking like jerks. Rebecca felt her own face burning with embarrassment and something deeper: shame. She'd assumed the worst about these kids from the moment she saw them. She'd looked at their worn clothes and old backpacks and immediately decided they didn't belong in business class, that they must be trying to scam the system somehow. "Mr. Chen?" Jennifer finally managed to stammer out. We had no idea." "I'm so sorry." If you'd known what?" Richard interrupted, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel underneath. "If you'd known I was CEO, you would have treated these children with respect. But because you thought I was just another passenger, it was okay to threaten 2 scared kids with security." Jennifer's face went from pale to red. "No, sir, that's not what I meant. What about if their parents had upgraded them? Would that have been acceptable?" Richard continued. Or is it just because they don't look like they belong here that this became a problem? Rebecca wanted to disappear. She wanted to go back in time and handle this whole situation differently, but time only moves forward. And all she could do now was stand there and face the consequences of her assumptions. Maya, who had been watching this entire exchange with wide eyes, spoke up softly. "Are we really allowed to stay here?" Richard's entire demeanor changed as he turned back to the children. The steel in his voice melted away, replaced with warmth and kindness. He knelt down in the aisle so he was at eye level with them. "Yes, sweetheart, you're absolutely allowed to stay here. These are your seats, and I'm very sorry that anyone made you feel like you didn't belong." He glanced back at Jennifer and Rebecca. "I think these ladies want to apologize too." Jennifer nodded quickly, moving closer to the children. "I'm so sorry. We were just doing our jobs, but we should have handled this better. You're welcome to stay right where you are." Rebecca added her own apology, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. "I'm sorry too. We shouldn't have upset you like that." The little boy finally lifted his face from his sister's shoulder, his cheeks wet with tears. "We weren't trying to steal seats," he said in a small voice. "We would never do something bad." Richard reached out and gently patted the boy's shoulder. "I know you wouldn't. You're good kids, and anyone with eyes could see that." The weight of his words hit Rebecca like a punch. Anyone with eyes could see that. But she hadn't seen it. She'd seen worn clothes and assumed the worst. She'd seen two kids who looked out of place and decided they must be doing something wrong. As Richard stood up, other passengers started to react. The woman across the aisle leaned over. "I have some snacks in my bag if you kids get hungry," she offered with a genuine smile. Another passenger, a businessman a few rows back, called out, "Hey, I've got an iPad with some games on it if you want to borrow it during the flight." Even the man in 3C, who'd been so annoyed earlier, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Sorry for being rude before," he muttered. Not quite making eye contact, it was like watching dominoes fall. One person showing kindness led to another and another. The same cabin that had been filled with judgment and impatience a few minutes ago was now full of people trying to make up for their initial reactions. Jennifer and Rebecca both stood there, unsure of what to do next. Richard looked at them both, and his expression was hard to read. There was disappointment there, certainly, but also something that might have been understanding. "We'll talk more about this later," he said quietly, so only they could hear. "For now, let's get this flight in the air. And maybe we can all remember that every passenger deserves respect, regardless of what they're wearing or how old they are." As he walked back toward first class, Rebecca felt the full weight of what had just happened settle onto her shoulders. She'd been doing this job for 8 years and thought she knew how to handle every situation, but today had taught her something she should have known all along. Never judge a book by its cover. And more importantly, never forget that behind every passenger there's a story you might not know. The plane had finally taken off, and the seatbelt sign had just dinged off. Rebecca was in the galley preparing drinks for the beverage service, but her hands were still shaking slightly. Jennifer was beside her, uncharacteristically quiet, her usual confident demeanor completely shattered. "I can't believe that just happened," Rebecca whispered, carefully placing ice cubes into plastic cups. "The CEO. Of all the passengers on all the flights, we had to—" "Don't." Jennifer cut her off, her voice tight. "Just don't. I keep replaying it in my head, and every time it gets worse." Through the galley curtain, Rebecca could see Richard Chen in his first-class seat, working on a laptop as if nothing unusual had happened. But every few minutes he'd glance back toward business class, checking on the kids. That simple gesture made Rebecca feel even worse somehow. He genuinely cared about those children, while she and Jennifer had been ready to throw them off the plane. "I need to know their story," Rebecca said suddenly. "I need to understand what we almost did." Jennifer looked at her. "Maybe that's not a good idea right now. We've already caused enough problems." "That's exactly why I need to know," Rebecca insisted. "Come on, help me with the beverage service. We'll do it right this time." When they rolled the cart into business class, Maya and her brother were sitting quietly, looking out the window at the clouds below. The little boy's eyes were still red from crying, but he seemed calmer now. Maya had her arm around him protectively, the same way she'd held him during the entire confrontation. Rebecca took a deep breath and approached their row with genuine warmth this time, not the forced professional smile from before. "Hi again. I know we got off to a rough start, but I'd like to make it up to you. Can I get you something to drink? We have sodas, juice, water, or if you want something fancy, we can make you a Shirley Temple or a Roy Rogers." The little boy looked up at his sister, as if asking permission. Maya studied Rebecca's face for a moment, probably trying to decide if this kindness was real or just another trick. "He likes orange juice," Maya said finally. "And I'll have water, please." "Coming right up," Rebecca said, preparing their drinks with extra care. She added a little umbrella to the orange juice, the kind they usually saved for tropical drinks. When she handed it to the boy, a tiny smile appeared on his face, the first she'd seen from him. "Thank you," he said softly. Rebecca nodded and was about to move to the next row when curiosity and guilt pushed her to speak. "I'm Rebecca, by the way. I don't think we properly introduced ourselves before. What are your names?" "I'm Maya, and this is my brother Danny," the girl replied, still cautious. "It's nice to meet you both properly this time." Rebecca hesitated, then added, "I really am sorry about earlier. We should have listened to you instead of making assumptions." Maya's expression softened just a little. "It's okay. People usually don't believe us about stuff." That statement hit Rebecca harder than she expected. What kind of life had these kids lived where adults not believing them was normal? As Rebecca continued down the aisle with the beverage cart, she couldn't stop thinking about Maya's words. When she returned to the galley, she found Jennifer preparing the snack service. "They're nice kids," Rebecca said. "The girl's name is Maya and the boy is Danny." Jennifer nodded, arranging cookies on small plates. "I noticed Mr. Chen keeps looking back at them. There's got to be a story there. Maybe we should ask him," Rebecca suggested. "Are you crazy? We're lucky he didn't fire us on the spot. I'm not about to go bother him with questions." But fate had other plans. A few minutes later, the call button from first class lit up. It was Richard Chen's seat. Jennifer and Rebecca looked at each other with equal parts dread. "I'll go," Rebecca volunteered, figuring she couldn't make things much worse than they already were. She walked up to first class, her heart pounding. Richard looked up from his laptop as she approached. "Yes, sir? How can I help you?" "Sit down for a moment," he said, gesturing to the empty seat next to him. "Please," Rebecca glanced around nervously. Sitting with passengers wasn't exactly protocol, but this wasn't exactly a normal situation. She sat on the edge of the seat, her posture stiff. "Relax," Richard said with a slight smile. "You look like you're expecting me to yell at you, aren't you?" Rebecca asked quietly. "No. I want to explain something because I think you and your colleague need to understand why what happened back there mattered so much." He paused, looking toward business class. "Can I tell you about those kids?" Rebecca nodded, relieved and curious at the same time. "I was in the terminal earlier this morning," Richard began, "walking around like I usually do when I travel. I don't announce who I am because I want to see how things really work, not how they work when everyone knows the boss is watching. I was getting coffee when I noticed Maya on her phone near the gate. She was crying, trying to keep her voice down, but I could hear bits of the conversation." He took a sip of his water before continuing. "She was talking to someone at a hospital in Miami. Her mother had been in a serious car accident the night before. The doctors weren't sure if she was going to make it through the next 24 hours. Rebecca felt her chest tighten. "Oh no. Their father died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Maya was 10, Danny was 8. Since then, it's just been the 3 of them. Their mom works 2 jobs trying to keep everything together." Richard's voice was heavy with emotion. "When the accident happened, Maya and Danny were at a neighbor's house. The hospital called and told them they needed to get to Miami immediately if they wanted to see their mother." "How did they even afford the tickets?" Rebecca asked. "They couldn't, not really. Maya told the hospital social worker that her mother kept an emergency fund, cash hidden in a coffee can in the kitchen. It was supposed to be for rent if her mom ever lost one of her jobs. The kids took that money, left a note for the neighbor, took a taxi to the airport and bought the cheapest tickets they could find." Rebecca put her hand over her mouth, imagining these 2 children navigating an airport alone, terrified, using their last bit of money to get to their dying mother. "I watched Maya hang up the phone," Richard continued. "She was trying so hard to be brave for her little brother, telling him everything would be okay, that mom was strong and would be fine. But I could see how scared she was. Danny kept asking if they'd get there in time, and Maya just kept saying yes, even though she clearly didn't know." "That's when you decided to help them," Rebecca said. "I couldn't just walk away. I have 2 daughters of my own. Grown now, but I keep thinking about if they'd been in that situation at that age. Alone, terrified, flying for the first time. He shook his head. I approached them carefully, didn't want to scare them more than they already were. I told them I worked for the airline and asked if they needed any help. What did they say? Maya was suspicious at first, which honestly was smart. But Danny started crying again and it all came spilling out. Their whole story. I asked if they'd ever flown before and they said no. They didn't know how boarding worked, what TSA was, nothing. They'd figured it out as they went, and let me tell you, the fact that they made it to the gate at all is impressive. Richard pulled up something on his laptop showing Rebecca the screen. It was a system view showing the seat upgrade he'd processed. I logged into our system right there in the terminal and upgraded their seats to business class. I wanted them to be comfortable, to have one less thing to worry about. I also wrote down the seat numbers for them, because I knew they might get confused during boarding. Why didn't you tell them who you were? Because I didn't want them to feel like charity cases. These are proud kids, Rebecca. They didn't ask for help. I offered it, and even then Maya hesitated. She asked if it would cost extra money, and when I said no, she wanted to know why I was being nice to them. He smiled sadly. She actually asked me what I wanted in return. Can you imagine? A 12-year-old girl who's already learned that kindness usually comes with a price. Rebecca felt tears stinging her eyes. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That sometimes people help because it's the right thing to do. That not everyone wants something in return. I told her my own daughters were her age once and I'd want someone to help them if they were ever scared and alone. He paused. Then I told them to board when their group was called and sit in seats 2A and 2B. I said I had to check on something with the pilots, which was true. I had some actual business to handle, but I also wanted to give them space, didn't want to hover. And then we almost ruined everything, Rebecca said quietly. You didn't know, Richard said, though his tone made it clear that wasn't really an excuse. But that's exactly the problem. You saw two kids who didn't look like they belonged in business class and you assumed they were doing something wrong. You didn't ask about their story. You didn't consider that there might be a legitimate reason for them being there. You just saw the surface and made a judgment. Rebecca nodded, unable to argue. He was absolutely right. Here's what worries me, Richard said, leaning forward slightly. If those kids had been wearing expensive clothes, if they'd had new luggage and fancy tablets, would you have questioned them at all? Probably not, Rebecca admitted, and that's the real issue. We judge people by how they look instead of seeing them as human beings with their own stories, their own struggles, their own dignity. The weight of his words settled over Rebecca like a heavy blanket. She thought about all the times she'd made snap judgments about passengers. The woman who came on board looking disheveled, and Rebecca had assumed she was just careless. The man with the heavy accent who struggled with his bags, and Rebecca had been impatient instead of helpful. How many times had she looked at someone and decided who they were without actually knowing anything about them? What's going to happen to them? Rebecca asked. To Maya and Danny? I've made some calls, Richard said. There's a hospital liaison meeting them at the Miami airport. They'll be taken directly to their mother. I've also arranged for the hospital to send me updates on her condition, and our company will cover any medical expenses their insurance doesn't handle. That's incredibly generous. It's the bare minimum of human decency, Richard corrected gently. Those kids shouldn't have to worry about money while their mother fights for her life. Rebecca stood up, knowing she needed to get back to work. But before she left, she turned back to Richard. Thank you for telling me their story, and thank you for caring enough to help them. Don't thank me, he said. Just learn from this. Every passenger has a story. Every person you meet is dealing with something you can't see. Treat them all with the dignity they deserve. As Rebecca walked back to the galley, she knew this was a flight she'd never forget. The flight had been in the air for about an hour when Rebecca noticed something shifting in the business class cabin. It started small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The same passengers who had been annoyed and judgmental earlier were now looking at Maya and Danny differently. The woman across the aisle, who'd offered snacks earlier, was now actually talking to Maya. Rebecca could hear bits of their conversation as she passed by with the lunch service cart. So you've never flown before? The woman was asking, her voice gentle and curious. Maya shook her head. No, ma'am. This is our first time. Well, you're handling it like a pro, the woman said warmly. I remember my first flight. I was so nervous I could barely eat. But look at you two, sitting here like seasoned travelers, Danny piped up, his voice small but clearer than before. The clouds look like cotton candy from up here. The woman laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to lighten the whole cabin. They really do, don't they? I've been flying for 20 years and I still think that sometimes. Rebecca continued down the aisle, distributing meals, but she kept observing. The man in seat 3C, the one who'd complained so loudly about the delay, was doing something on his tablet. Every so often he'd glance over at the kids and his expression wasn't annoyed anymore. It was thoughtful, maybe even a little ashamed. When Rebecca reached his row, he looked up at her. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sir. What can I help you with?" He lowered his voice so only she could hear. "Those kids back there, are they traveling alone to visit family or something?" Rebecca hesitated. It wasn't really her place to share their story, but something about his genuine concern made her feel like he deserved to know. "They're going to see their mother. She's in the hospital. It's pretty serious." The man's face fell. He glanced back at Maya and Danny, and Rebecca could see the guilt wash over him. "And I complained about them causing a delay. God, I'm such an idiot." "You didn't know," Rebecca said, though the words felt hollow. That was becoming the excuse of the day, wasn't it? Nobody knew, so everyone felt justified in their judgment. "That doesn't make it okay," the man said, echoing her own thoughts. "I should have been more patient regardless. They're just kids." After Rebecca finished the lunch service, she returned to the galley where Jennifer was organizing the trash. The head flight attendant looked exhausted, and not from the physical work. This flight had taken an emotional toll on both of them. "The whole cabin feels different now," Jennifer observed quietly. "It's like everyone suddenly remembered how to be human." "Guilt is a powerful motivator," Rebecca replied. "It's more than that, though, isn't it?" Jennifer said, looking through the galley curtain at the passengers. "When Mr. Chen called us out, everyone realized they were part of the problem too. The people who recorded it on their phones, the ones who complained, the ones who just sat there judging. Nobody wants to be that person." Rebecca was about to respond when she noticed Richard Chen walking down the aisle toward business class. He moved with purpose, and she watched as he stopped at Maya and Danny's row. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" Richard asked, gesturing to the empty seat next to them. The seat next to Maya had remained vacant, an unusual occurrence in a typically full business class cabin. Maya nodded, and Richard settled into the seat. Rebecca couldn't hear what they were saying from the galley, but she could see the interaction. Richard pulled out his phone and showed the kids something on the screen. Danny leaned in close, his eyes widening. Maya's hand went to her mouth, and even from a distance, Rebecca could see tears forming in her eyes. After a few minutes, Richard stood up and made his way back to first class. As he passed the galley, he caught Rebecca's eye and gave a small nod. Something had happened, something important. Rebecca couldn't contain her curiosity. She made her way back to Maya and Danny's row, pretending to check if they needed anything. "How are you two doing? Can I get you anything else?" Maya looked up at her, and there was a brightness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Chen just talked to the hospital. They said our mom woke up. She's awake and asking for us." Rebecca felt her own eyes fill with tears. "That's wonderful news." "That's such great news. The doctor said she's still not out of danger, but it's a good sign." Maya continued, her voice trembling with hope and relief. "Mr. Chen said someone will be at the airport to take us straight to the hospital when we land." Danny tugged on his sister's sleeve. "Tell her the other part." Maya's cheeks flushed slightly. "Mr. Chen said his company will help with the hospital bills. We don't have to worry about the money." Rebecca felt her throat tighten. "That's amazing. You two must be so relieved." "I don't understand why he's being so nice to us," Maya said quietly, her 12-year-old mind still trying to process this level of kindness from a stranger. "We're nobody special. We're just regular kids." Rebecca knelt down in the aisle so she was at eye level with Maya. "You listen to me. You are special. You're a brave young woman who took care of her little brother and did whatever it took to get to your mom. That takes courage. And people help because that's what good people do. Not because you're special in some famous way, but because you're human beings who deserve kindness. My mom always says there are good people in the world," Danny said softly. "I didn't really believe her before, but I think I do now." Those simple words from a 10-year-old hit Rebecca harder than anything else that day. What kind of world had these children experienced that made them doubt the existence of good people? And how close had she come to confirming their worst beliefs? As Rebecca stood up to continue her duties, the woman across the aisle spoke up. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. Your mother is going to be okay? Maya nodded. They think so. We hope so. That's wonderful, the woman said. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Listen, I'm a nurse. I work at Mount Sinai in New York, but I know people at most major hospitals. If you need anything or if you have questions about your mom's care, you call me. Okay? Day or night? Maya took the card with shaking hands. Thank you. That's really nice of you. The man in 3C turned around in his seat. Hey, kids. I wanted to apologize for earlier. I was rude and impatient, and that wasn't cool. I'm sorry. It's okay, Maya said, though her voice suggested she wasn't entirely sure how to respond to an adult apologizing to her. No, it's not okay, the man insisted, but I appreciate you being gracious about it. He pulled out his wallet and took out a card. I'm a lawyer. If you guys need any help navigating medical stuff, insurance claims, any of that legal nonsense, you call me. Pro bono, no charge. It's the least I can do. Another passenger a few rows back stood up and walked over. She was holding a stuffed teddy bear, the kind you buy in airport gift shops. I bought this for my niece, but I think you should have it, she said to Danny. For good luck. Danny looked at his sister for permission before taking it. He hugged the bear close and whispered, Thank you. It was like a dam had broken. One by one, passengers started offering help. Someone gave Maya a prepaid phone card in case they needed to make calls from the hospital. Another passenger, who owned a restaurant in Miami, wrote down the address and said the kids could eat there anytime. No questions asked. A woman who worked in hotel management gave them a voucher for a free hotel room if they needed a place to stay. Rebecca watched this unfold with a mixture of emotions. It was beautiful, seeing people come together to help these children, but there was also something bittersweet about it. Why did it take a crisis and a CEO calling them out for people to show compassion? Why wasn't this kind of kindness the default? Jennifer appeared beside her, also watching the scene. I've been flying for 20 years, she said quietly. I've never seen anything like this. Me neither, Rebecca admitted. I've been thinking about what Mr. Chen said, about how we judge people by how they look. Jennifer's voice was thick with emotion. How many times have we done this? Made assumptions? Treated people differently based on what they were wearing or how they talked or what section of the plane they were sitting in? Too many times, Rebecca said. Way too many. We need to do better, Jennifer said firmly. Not just on this flight, but every flight. Every passenger, every time, Rebecca nodded. Agreed. As the flight continued, the atmosphere in the cabin remained warm and supportive. Passengers who'd been strangers an hour ago were now chatting with each other, united by their shared desire to help Maya and Danny. The little boy fell asleep holding his new teddy bear, his head resting on his sister's shoulder. Maya stayed awake, staring out the window at the clouds, probably thinking about her mother and everything that was waiting for them in Miami. Rebecca made her way back to first class to check on Richard. He was back at his laptop working on something that looked important. Mr. Chen, she said softly, I just wanted to say thank you for what you did for those kids and for what you taught all of us today. Richard looked up and gave her a tired smile. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just treated two children with the dignity they deserved. That should be normal, not exceptional. Well, it meant everything to them, and it changed something in that cabin. People are actually being kind to each other. Good, Richard said. That's how it should be. Every flight, every day, people should be kind to each other because that's what makes us human. Rebecca nodded and turned to leave, but Richard called her back. Rebecca, one more thing. What happened today with you and Jennifer and those kids? I'm not going to report it or put it in your files, but I need you to promise me something. Anything, sir. Promise me you'll remember this feeling, this discomfort, this guilt, this realization that you almost made a terrible mistake, and promise me you'll use it to be better, not just as a flight attendant, but as a person. I promise, Rebecca said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. As she walked back to the galley, she knew this was more than just a promise to her CEO. It was a promise to herself, to Maya and Danny, and to every passenger she'd ever meet in the future. She would do better. She would be better. The plane continued its journey toward Miami, carrying not just passengers, but lessons that would last a lifetime. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their descent into Miami. Rebecca watched as passengers began gathering their belongings, closing laptops and putting away phones. But there was something different about this landing. Usually, business class passengers were in a hurry, already standing before the seatbelt sign turned off, eager to be first off the plane. Today, nobody seemed to be in a rush. Maya gently woke Danny, who'd been sleeping peacefully for the last hour. He rubbed his eyes and looked out the window at the city below, the afternoon sun making everything look golden and bright. "We're almost there," Maya told him, her voice a mixture of hope and nervousness. "We're almost to Mom." Rebecca approached them one last time before landing. "The hospital liaison will meet you right at the gate. You won't have to worry about finding your way. Mr. Chen made sure everything is arranged." "I don't know how we'll ever thank him," Maya said quietly. "I think seeing you two with your mom will be all the thanks he needs," Rebecca replied, surprised by how much she meant it. The plane touched down smoothly, and as it taxied to the gate, Rebecca noticed something unusual. Richard Chen had gotten up from first class and was standing in the aisle of business class, near Maya and Danny's row. Other passengers noticed too, and a quiet understanding seemed to pass through the cabin. When the seatbelt sign finally turned off, nobody moved. Usually there would be a mad scramble for the overhead bins, people pushing to get out first. But today everyone remained seated, waiting. Richard looked at Maya and Danny. "Ready?" he asked gently. They nodded, gathering their worn backpacks. As they stepped into the aisle, something unexpected happened. The woman across the aisle started clapping. Then the man in 3C joined in. Within seconds, the entire business class cabin was applauding, some people standing, others wiping tears from their eyes. Maya's face turned red, overwhelmed by the attention. Danny pressed close to his sister's side, but he was smiling, really smiling for the first time since boarding. These weren't just strangers anymore. For a few hours in the air, these people had become something like family, connected by a shared moment of humanity. Richard led them toward the exit, and as they passed, passengers reached out to touch their shoulders, offering final words of encouragement. "Good luck, sweetheart. Your mom is going to be so proud of you. You're brave kids. Don't forget that." Rebecca stood by the exit door with Jennifer, watching them go. As Maya passed, she stopped and looked at both flight attendants. "Thank you for apologizing earlier," she said simply. Not a lot of grown-ups apologize to kids. Those words would stay with Rebecca for the rest of her life. As Maya and Danny disappeared down the jetway with Richard, Jennifer let out a long breath. "I think I need a vacation after this flight. I think I need to rethink my entire career approach," Rebecca said. The rest of the passengers deplaned normally, though many stopped to speak with Rebecca and Jennifer. Some thanked them for their service, as always, but others said something different. "That was a special flight," one man said. "Thank you for being part of it." "Those kids reminded me of what's really important," a woman added. "I needed that reminder." After everyone had left and the plane was empty, Rebecca and Jennifer began their usual post-flight duties, checking seat pockets and preparing for the cleaning crew. They worked in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. "Do you think we would have acted differently if Mr. Chen hadn't been there?" Jennifer finally asked. Rebecca stopped what she was doing. It was the question she'd been avoiding all flight. "Honestly, probably not. We would have made those kids move to economy, felt justified about it, and never thought about it again." "That's what scares me," Jennifer admitted. "How many times have we been wrong without realizing it? How many people have we treated unfairly because we judged them too quickly?" "I don't know," Rebecca said. "But I know I never want to feel like this again. That moment when Mr. Chen revealed who he was, when I realized what we'd almost done to those kids, that feeling of shame and guilt, I never want that again. So what do? We do what Mr. Chen said. We remember, and we do better." 3 weeks later, Rebecca was working another flight, this time to Boston. A young man boarded wearing ripped jeans and a faded band t-shirt, carrying a guitar case covered in stickers. Old Rebecca would have watched him carefully, maybe even been suspicious if he sat in a seat that seemed too good for his appearance. But new Rebecca simply smiled and said, "Welcome aboard. Can I help you find your seat?" The young man smiled back. "I'm in 4A, I think. First time in business class. Someone gifted me an upgrade." "Well, congratulations," Rebecca said warmly. "Let me know if you need anything during the flight." As she walked away, she caught herself. She'd done it. She'd treated someone with respect and kindness without making a single assumption about who he was or whether he belonged there. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. She thought about Maya and Danny often. Richard had kept her updated, sending a brief email a week after the Miami flight. Their mother had survived, though recovery would be long. The airline had set up a fund to help with medical expenses and living costs while she couldn't work. Richard had also arranged for trauma counseling for the kids, recognizing that everything they'd been through would have lasting effects. But the most touching part of the email was at the end. Richard had included a drawing that Danny had made. It showed an airplane flying through clouds, with stick figures visible through the windows. At the bottom, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for helping us get to Mommy." Rebecca had that drawing framed. It hung in her locker at work, a daily reminder of the most important lesson she'd ever learned. Jennifer had changed too. Rebecca noticed her colleague taking extra time with passengers who seemed confused or nervous, especially elderly travelers and families with young children. The hard edge that had defined Jennifer's management style had softened. She was still professional, still efficient, but now there was genuine warmth behind it. One day, about a month after the Miami flight, Rebecca and Jennifer were assigned to work together again. As they prepared the cabin before boarding, Jennifer brought up something she'd been thinking about. "I've been talking to Mr. Chen," she said, organizing the safety equipment. "He's implementing a new training program for all flight crew. It's focused on empathy, on seeing passengers as people rather than just tickets and seat numbers." "Really?" Rebecca was surprised. "That's ambitious." He said that flight changed him too. Made him realize that if his own crew could make those kinds of assumptions, it was a company-wide issue that needed addressing. Jennifer paused. "He wants us to help develop the program. Share our story, talk about what we learned." Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness. "You mean tell everyone about our mistake?" "Yes. He thinks it's important for people to hear from us directly, to understand how easy it is to slip into judgment and how important it is to catch yourself before you do. It wouldn't be easy, admitting their failure to colleagues and trainees. But Rebecca thought about Maya and Danny, about their courage in the face of fear and uncertainty. If two kids could be that brave, surely she could too. "Okay," Rebecca agreed. "Let's do it." Over the following months, Rebecca and Jennifer shared their story dozens of times. Some people were skeptical, insisting they would never make such assumptions. But most listened carefully, and Rebecca could see recognition in their eyes. Everyone had judged someone unfairly at some point. The key was acknowledging it and choosing to do better. The program grew beyond just Skyward Airlines. Other carriers heard about it and wanted to implement similar training. Richard Chen spoke at industry conferences, advocating for a more human-centered approach to air travel. He never mentioned himself as the hero of the story. Instead, he always centered Maya and Danny, talking about their resilience and what they'd taught him. 6 months after that memorable flight, Rebecca received an invitation. Richard Chen was hosting a small dinner at his home, and Maya, Danny, and their mother would be there. He wanted to reconnect everyone who'd been part of that day. Rebecca almost didn't go. Part of her worried that seeing the kids again would bring back all those feelings of shame. But a bigger part of her knew she needed to go, needed to see how they were doing. When she arrived at Richard's home, she was surprised by how normal and warm it felt. This wasn't some cold mansion. It was a real home, with family photos on the walls and comfortable furniture that looked lived in. Maya and Danny were there, looking healthier and happier than she'd ever seen them. Their mother, still recovering but clearly on the mend, sat on the couch with her arm around Danny. When Maya saw Rebecca, she didn't hesitate. She walked right up and hugged her, a gesture that surprised Rebecca so much she almost didn't know how to respond. "I'm glad you came," Maya said. "I wanted to see you again." "I'm glad I came too," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "How are you?" "How's your mom?" "She's doing good. She goes to physical therapy 3 times a week, and the doctors say she'll make a full recovery. It'll take time, but she's going to be okay." Throughout the evening, Rebecca talked with the family, learning more about their lives. Their mother shared how proud she was of her children, how their strength during the crisis had inspired her own recovery. Danny showed Rebecca his school report card, all A's and B's, and told her he wanted to be a pilot when he grew up. As the evening wound down, Richard gathered everyone together. I want to thank you all for coming. That flight 6 months ago changed all of us in different ways. It reminded me that the most important part of running an airline isn't about profits or efficiency. Though those matter, it's about people. Every single person who steps on one of our planes has a story, has dignity, has worth. He looked at Maya and Danny. These two reminded me of that. And they reminded all of us that we have a choice in every interaction. We can choose judgment or kindness. We can choose assumptions or understanding. We can choose to see surfaces or to see souls. Rebecca looked around the room at the faces gathered there. Some she recognized from the flight, others were new. But they were all connected by that shared experience, by the lesson they'd learned at 30,000 feet. As she drove home that night, Rebecca thought about how one flight, one moment, one choice to help two scared children had created ripples that spread farther than anyone could have imagined. It hadn't just changed her or Jennifer or Richard. It had started a movement toward treating people with more compassion, more understanding, more humanity. And it all started because someone chose kindness when it would have been easier to walk away. Because a CEO chose to see two children in need rather than just passengers in the wrong seats. Because mistakes were acknowledged and lessons were learned. Rebecca smiled to herself as she pulled into her driveway. Tomorrow she'd go back to work, back to flights and passengers and all the usual chaos of airline life. But she'd go back different, better, more aware of the power she held in every interaction, every assumption, every choice. And she'd never forget the two brave kids who taught her the most important lesson of her career. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of what they're wearing, where they're sitting, or what assumptions we might make. Everyone has a story. Everyone matters. That was a lesson worth remembering every single day for the rest of her life.